Welcome to the High Ticket Success Podcast, where premium coaches, consultants, and advisors come for bold strategies, big breakthroughs, and real results. I'm your host, Dave Dubeau.
Hey, gang, welcome back. Today, another special guest zooming in, Neil Gordon. Neil is a definite expert when it comes to communication, specifically verbal communication, specifically speaking and persuasion. That's what Neil's all about. And we're going to be talking about the importance of persuasion and one sentence that can kind of turn things completely around for you if you're having a challenge with that. So Neil, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave.
So we're talking about speaking and persuasion, and I just bumbled and fumbled and mumbled my way through that whole introduction. So forgive me, but maybe give people a bit better of an idea of who you are and what your specialty is, who you serve these days, Neil.
My background is in book publishing, Dave, in that I was a low-level editor at Penguin many, many years ago. And then to your introduction, to the point of your introduction, I moved more into the speaking realm and helping speakers, although I like to say that I help speakers/authors.
Okay.
And because I find that the things that work for speakers work just as well for authors, and the two inform each other on a
quite often one is the same as the other. A lot of authors are speakers and speakers are authors. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And now your main focus these days is around persuasion. So where did you kind of figure out that that's really what resonated with you and where most of us need the most help?
Many years ago, I was visiting my now late father at his home, and he introduced me to this documentary that he had seen on this thing called a TED conference.
Okay.
And it was funny. Do you remember the movie Spaceballs? And how by Mel Brooks, right? And the woman who played Princess Vespa directed and narrated this documentary, and it was on the 2006 TED conference. And this is where we saw greats like Ken Robinson, who gave the most viewed TED Talk of all time at that particular conference. And that was my introduction to it. And I started watching a lot of TED Talks in the ensuing years. And when a couple of years later, Simon Sinek came out with his famous talk on the power of why. And I watched that, and he very famously says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But he said it like 7 times during the talk. And I wondered about the nature of that sentence. But then when I looked back at other TED Talks, I realized that they all had, not all, but many of them had a similar kind of sentence. Maybe not repeated 7 times, but it was strategically placed at a certain point in the talk, often explicitly cited as the idea worth spreading. And when I looked at nonfiction books and I looked at ancient quotes by philosophers like Socrates or the ancient military strategist Sun Tzu, I realized that they all had this same kind of sentence. And so for the last, I'd say 13, 14 years, I've been devotedly trying to get across the power of this sentence to as many different people in the speaking and author and otherwise thought leadership world as I can, because it has a night and day difference on how other people receive their message and their expertise.
Okay. Well, that ties in nicely to your book, right?
Yes.
Which I think you've got behind you there.
I do.
What is the title of your book?
The Most Powerful Sentence of All Time.
Okay. So if I'm following the dots here, which once in a while I do, Neil.
Once in a while, sure. I encourage you one day to give yourself even more credit than that, Dave. I think you're doing very, very well.
So really, you're helping us to synthesize the core of our message into one sentence that can really hook people. Am I kind of getting the gist there? Is that kind of the idea?
There are admittedly a number of different, very nuanced applications situationally that a person can use this sentence. However, the larger point, when we were just talking about Simon Sinek, and his whole thing is codifying why.
Yeah.
Well, this sentence essentially codifies how.
Mm-hmm.
When someone makes a promise in the context of our conversation, like a high ticket kind of offer, let's say it's an executive coach. And an executive coach says, I'm going to help you to be able to solve for this and get unstuck in your work, et cetera, et cetera. And that could be the 10th conversation they have with an executive coach that week. It's like, I've been hearing the same thing from all these people. And then they ask, how are you different? What a person in this situation can do is say, while most executives are trying to solve this larger problem, what they mistakenly think is that they need to X, Y, Z. But the key to solving this problem is blank. At the heart of what you say, and the key to solving this problem is blank, is you're codifying how change is possible. You're saying, and people think that this is what they need to do. This is how they're supposed to go about solving for this. But actually, the way to solve for this is this. So Sun Tzu, who I mentioned a moment ago, in The Art of War, on line 18 of the first chapter, he says, all of warfare is based on deception. And so let's say Sun Tzu is in modern times and he's a military strategist and he's just been seen at some conference in military, whatever. And someone comes up to him and says, all right, I have a lot of experts on military. How are you different, Sun Tzu? He said, all right, while most people think that they're going to win a war with the biggest army and the best weaponry and the most advanced technology, the key to actually winning at war is deceiving your opponent. And that's the how. What this does, Dave, is it plants this sense in the listener that change is possible. They can see themselves doing it. Oh, I get it now. I see where I've been going wrong, and now I can do it. Can you help me to do that? So that in the context of high ticket success, that's ultimately what I want our listeners to take away, is that this sentence shows other people how change is possible for them.
No, that's powerful. I'm thinking to myself, geez, yeah, I could use some improvement in that department for sure. So what would be an example? I mean, Sun Tzu's great and,
Sure.
Simon's great and all that kind of stuff. What would be an example of somebody that you've worked with? Tell us the story of you don't have to give exact names or anything if you don't want to, but
of course,
like, where were they at when they started working with you? How did you help them? What did it end up looking like? What was their sentence? Do you have a good case study that you can share with us about somebody?
I can, and I can share the name just because she gave me a very nice testimonial, and so shared the details that you can find on my site, so you know that I'm, of course, telling you the truth. But also, she uses her sentence in her email signature, which I never even would have suggested as being the thing, because it's not really a tagline. It's more of a recipe for success. Mm-hmm. And it usually, if someone's giving a talk, it's not the first thing you say like a hook. It's more of a thing that you say 2/3 of the way in, for example.
Right.
And so she uses it. So she puts it out there. So all of that says to me that she wants people to hear this. And so she had a stable of clients in the executive coaching space, but she had this larger approach to culture building for an organization and leadership approach to leadership, all based on being trauma responsive. And the problem with being trauma responsive, or at least talking about being trauma responsive in your marketing, in your initial conversations, what have you, is that people don't actually believe they are walking around with trauma.
Or they might not even know what the hell trauma responsive even means.
Exactly.
Trauma is different for everybody, right?
Exactly. It's a word that the more your words need to be interpreted by others, the less empowering they are.
Yeah.
And so trauma isn't really an inherently empowering concept to wrap one's mind around. For some people who are informed about the whole thing, sure, but not so much for a leader who just wants their team to be more engaged.
Yeah, Joe executive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The attrition rate at their organization is off the charts, and they want people to stop leaving because it's so expensive to hire again. Anyway, so people were just nodding and smiling and sending her on her way when she would talk about her work. And then we worked out her sentence, which had the benefit of some context. And we put together a talk where she builds up strategically to this sentence. It's not the first thing she said.
It's not the title of the talk.
It's not the title of the talk. She didn't even talk about trauma at the beginning of the talk.
Yeah.
She strategically mentions one technique I like, and this is for our speaking listeners. that's very valuable, not even just in speaking, but that happens to be the application or the case study. I like to have people start with the problem that the audience cares about solving, and then strategically move to the problem that you, the expert, diagnose under the surface. And that might be
so the problem they think they have, and then really get to the core, the real problem.
with a little education, right?
Yeah.
But you don't start with your understanding of it as an expert. You start with their understanding and then move deliberately to that renewed understanding. How do you solve that? Well, here's the solution. And that's where this sentence comes in. So I had to reframe the solution as becoming trauma informed, understanding what trauma is. That's maybe a third of the way in. And then 3/4 of the way in, or whatever it was, we then had her hit the audience with a sentence: connection is what mitigates trauma. Connection mitigates trauma. 3 words. They're not always 3 words, right? Some of the examples I gave are much longer than that. But the point is that when you use this sentence, they suddenly get it. Oh, we need to foster more meaningful connection in the organization. That will help with attrition. That will help with disengagement, et cetera, et cetera. And so her testimonial, she describes how, I can't get into her numbers, but I can say that I believe she said she got like a 10x ROI from from the first phase of our consultation. And we can infer from that a great deal of success, and particularly high ticket selling and all of that. So it wasn't so much about just having the sentence. It was having the sentence and then creating powerful context for it.
Yeah.
And the two together becomes like a 1-2 punch.
So that's kind of where you come in and you help your clients. That's really kind of getting all of that dialed in. Am I understanding that correctly?
Of course, right. The first step is to find that sentence. And then the second step is to find the optimal context, which could be a talk, it could be a book, it could be...
Well, that's the next question I had for you then, Neil, is where are the different places that we can, once we figure out our sentence, where are we looking at plunking it in? So you talked about a lot of experience with public speaking. So you're doing a talk. That makes sense. You talked about a book. You can create a book from your talk or kind of expand on things.
Of course.
What about like more on the one-on-one conversations, like in a sales call, a discovery call, something like that? Where does this come into play there?
Another one of my clients, also, it's funny, I work with many more types of people than executive coaches, but he also happened to be an executive coach, and he developed a program that he was pitching to HR departments at Fortune 500 companies. And he had his contacts already. He had the relationships. He developed a new program on how to give better feedback as managers to your charges. And there are lots of people in the coaching space who have something similar, and he was at risk of being commoditized. And when we're suffering from the commoditization problem, we're just competing on price, right? And so how does he get around that? They asked him quite directly, how are you different? And then he was able to say, well, while a lot of feedback programs do this, my program, at the heart of my program, the key to giving good feedback is blank. And so in a sales conversation where you're asked quite directly, how are you different? Or how do you
volunteer that's part of your presentation, how we're different. Everybody else does this, we do that.
Sure. You could do that in a proposal. You could do it in a pitch deck. If you have a demo video, if you're a SaaS type program, then you can put that together, or even just any kind of demo video, what it makes us different kind of thing, or what is our way of doing things, or what have you. This sentence becomes the basis of all of that.
Right. Yeah. So then extrapolating on that, pretty much anywhere you're trying to influence somebody about you and your services, this is going to come into play. So webinars as well, any kind of presentation.
Of course.
Yeah.
I was once given a format for a webinar that I used back in the 2010s when long form webinars were a lot more effective. And it was like a 5 shift or 5 concept model.
Yeah.
And it went against the idea of like building to a single idea, but I was just trying out the template, and I made each one of those 5 shifts grounded in this kind of sentence. And it was a very effective webinar. I believe other people were dealing with like a 20 or 25% no-show rate. And this sentence helped to build so much trust that I think I had like maybe a 2% no-show rate, if that. It was like 6 or 7 people out of 400 or 500. I mean, I am fudging the numbers a little bit. It was a tiny percentage of all the people who didn't show, to say nothing of the fact that it was very helpful in creating enough trust through the discovery process for them to become clients.
Yeah. Very, very cool. So, Neil, as we're wrapping things up, tell us a little bit more about the book. You've kind of explained the process a bit, but tell me more about your book, because I'm personally very interested in it, and I'm probably going to jump off this call and go grab a copy myself. But for folks that are hearing about it for the first time, what's it all about?
It is framed as a fable, actually. And so fans of books like The Go-Giver and The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and other books like that.
Who Moved My Cheese and all that.
Who Moved My Cheese. Yeah. People who like that kind of learning experience will be happy to know that this is a fable about a CEO of a small education services company who is really struggling to get her very cutting edge technology to be taken seriously by school districts. And so has an opportunity to pitch it very concisely to a mega dream client, and meets a very seemingly unlikely mentor in the process of figuring out how to frame this innovative concept to a prospective client that could really change things for her company.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Awesome, Neil. So if people want to get the book or check you out or find out more about you and your services, where should they go?
My website is the simplest and best place to look. You can find me at neilcanhelp.com, neilcanhelp.com. And I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or are interested in talking.
And I'm going to give your website a plug because I love Neil's website, because he's got some artwork on there. He's got illustrations on there that he did himself. And he's a very talented cartoonist. And I absolutely love the cartoons that he's got on his site. So if for nothing else, check out Neil's site, get a smile, enjoy the cartoons, and I'm going to grab the book as well. So Neil, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much as well, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody, take care, and we will talk to you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the High Ticket Success Podcast. Want to be featured? Share your story and inspire other premium coaches, consultants, and advisors? Apply now at highticketsuccesspodcast.com/guest.